The Hello World application is the classic application for learning how to write your first program regardless of the language. We are going to learn a little bit about JavaScript, and I'm going to have you write the Hello World application using 4 different techniques: window.alert, document.write, object.enter.html, and console.write. But first, let's see, how do you even add JavaScript to your HTML? Where does JavaScript go? You're going to see that JavaScript is a lot like CSS as to where you decide where you want to place the script. You can do inline, you can do embedded, and you can do external. JavaScript, like CSS and HTML, is simply a text file. Here is an example of an inline script. So we have your HTML hyperlink, and in this case the hyperlink, instead of going to a URL, will go and execute JavaScript. If you recall, you've done something similar to this with the mail to : and an email address. In this case, you're using JavaScript : and this would be a function that JavaScript will be executing. Here's another inline style. In this case, it's using the onClick event for a button object, and this is a JavaScript command. It will open up a pop-up window that says, "Are you sure?" Here is an example of embedded JavaScript. So let's think back to CSS. If you embed CSS, you need to embed it in the head tags. With JavaScript, you can embed JavaScript wherever you want your code to execute. Usually I put mine in the head tags, but it depends. It doesn't need to be between the head tags. So like CSS, you had a style element, and you would nest all of your style rules inside the opening and closing elements. And your style element said type equals text CSS, and this instead will be a script element, type text JavaScript. This is a comment in JavaScript, and here is that same Hello World alert, this time nested in embedded JavaScript. Finally, just like CSS, you can link to an external JavaScript page. Now, instead of using link like we did with CSS, you will use an opening and closing script tag. Notice we don't have any actual script in between. In addition to the type text JavaScript, you are now going to add a source, and then this will be the name of the external file. So external JavaScript files are purely text files. We save them with a JavaScript extension. I've created here an HTML5 document in Dreamweaver CC, and within the HTML document I have added some embedded JavaScript. So I've simply added a button, which you can see displayed up here in the design view, and I want to tell you a little bit about type equals button. There are actually 3 types of button in HTML5. So if you use button, that will not direct anything to the server. So when you do input type equals submit, you're expected that this will be nested in a form, and it will collect the data and submit that data in the form to the server. Input type equals reset will reset all of the values, all the field elements that you've set between the forms. And finally, we got type equals button, and type equals button is only something that's executed in the client. Since JavaScript is client-side scripting, type equals button to create a click event is perfect. So value equals say hello. If you recall, the value is what you will see on the button. And then finally, this is an event saying when this button is clicked, execute this JavaScript. This JavaScript will pop up an alert button. Now let me tell you a few things. So JavaScript does use objects, and the default object is called the window object. Now, since the window object is the default object, I did not have it there, but this is the default object. The window object in JavaScript represents the browser window itself, including the browser address bar and the sides and the back button. All of that is part of the window object. Alert is a method. So a method is something the object can do. In this case, an alert will pop up a new window with the text, okay, that you see displayed here. Now let me tell you a little bit more things that will help you not get in trouble. So all of this is a string that contains a JavaScript command. Notice that I have double quotes around the string. The argument to this method, now what an argument is the input that goes to the alert method. We call that input an argument, is in single quotes. If you try to do a double quote right here, JavaScript is going to think, well, that's the end of the command, which it's not, and it will cause an error. So whenever you need to have a string within a string, let the outer quotes be one type, in this case double quotes, and the inner quotes be a different type, which in this case is single quotes. So I'm in live view, I click on say hello, and there is my hello world window that just popped up. Now I have some embedded JavaScript. This embedded JavaScript I place between the head tags, and it will use the element script, similar as I said to style, type equals text JavaScript, and in between is the JavaScript statement document.write. This is an object. The document object represents the HTML document that you are looking at. Dot write. So the dot operator separates the object from the method. The method is an action. So this says write to the document hello world 2. And you notice that it has done that. It's written hello world 2. Notice I don't have anything in the body that says to do that. So hello world 2, and it's done before the button, and that makes sense because this occurs before the output of the button. Now I've added 2 breaks here. So any HTML string can be put inside as an argument to the write method. Suppose I put a document.write below the button. And this time I'll do hello world 3. And I'll put it inside some H3 tags. And we'll see how that renders up here. So, because this output is being done after the button, okay, you will notice that hello world 3 is after the output of the button. So let's create an external JavaScript file. Going to choose new document, going to choose JavaScript and create. Like CSS, all you will be doing is putting pure code. There should be no HTML unless it's an argument, a string argument, but there should be no HTML within the JavaScript file itself. Okay, and this is just a line comment. So I will need to save this JavaScript file, and I am saving it into the same folder as the Hello World folder. And so I can put any JavaScript in here that I would like, but how do I point to that file? Just like external CSS, I will now have to add a script element. Okay, so I've now added a pair of script tags, but instead of putting the script here embedded, I am pointing to the external file. So we've looked at using window.alert to create a hello world in a window, and the document.write to update it. It just outputs right wherever the current line is at. Let's look at this object.enterHTML. In JavaScript, you can dynamically change any object by first of all referencing that object and then using the inner HTML method. So in JavaScript, every single element is considered an object. So in other words, you can go into any element and modify what's inside of that element at runtime. Okay, I've created a div, given a little bit of style, so there's a green border around it, and it has some text and an unordered list and a paragraph. And here it is. here's my div, and you'll see that I've given that div an ID of some div. In JavaScript, I can point to this div by using that ID, similar to in CSS using the ID selector. Below this, I've added a button, and that button has an on-click event handler, and in that button I'm calling a change div function. So let me come over to my external JavaScript, and I'm going to create a function called change div. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but JavaScript is case sensitive. So since I have change div here using camel casing, I'm going to add the function name change div here. So in order to grab that ID, I'm going to create an object variable called the div. And to get it, I'm going to use a method of the document object. Now remember, the document object means this web page, this web document. And the name of this method is called getElementById. And notice that the input that I need into it is an ID. And this will be a string. Now I got to come over and recall what I called it. And I called it some div. Again, case sensitive. So I'm going to call it some div here. Now, whenever I reference this variable, it means that object. It means that div. I'm going to use the inner HTML property of that object to change the inner HTML. So let's change all that content that was in there to just Hello World 4. So now we have written 4 hello worlds. Of course, this is called inner HTML, so you can put any kind of HTML inside of it. You want it to be inside of a strong tag? Well, you can do that. Okay, and we'll save both of those, and we'll take a look. And notice that I'm not seeing that. I'm still seeing the original HTML. And why is that? Well, let's take a look at how JavaScript works. Notice that this JavaScript is in a function. Functions will only execute when you call the function. So when am I calling the function? Well, let's look at our other JavaScript. This is not inside a function. So JavaScript that is not written inside a function simply executes as it's coming down and processing the web page. Here I have a button. And notice the on-click event calls the function. So the code inside of that function will not execute until I click on it. Let's take a look. And there we go. It says Hello World 4. And the fourth way I wanted to say hello world, though this will be our fifth hello world, is using the console object. So the log method of the console object is going to output this string. So here I am in the HTML, and I'm going to preview this in Chrome. And what is the console? Well, believe it or not, you've been in it many times. When you choose Inspect, you have the option of viewing the console. So when you are referencing the console object, you are referencing this right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click change the div. That's going to call our JavaScript. And there it is. It wrote out the fifth hello world. In fact, this console object is actually telling me exactly where it grabbed it. And you'll notice that the console, or when you use Inspect, not only are you looking at the HTML and the CSS, you can also look at and debug your JavaScript. So for your assignment today, I am looking for you to create the Hello World app several ways, and I'll give you more details in the assignment.